Hi, Alan. Nice to see you today.
Yeah,
Um,
good to see you too, Dan.
yeah, where are we catching you now?
I am at Rowan University in New Jersey. I just started a new teaching position here.
Excellent, excellent. You and I have known each other for wow, a good number of years now, actually, from when we first talked about collaborating on the WebRTC book, the one that most people are
Yeah.
familiar with. So I know a good bit of your background, of course, having spent a lot of time with you in the past few years. But I'm not sure everybody really does, and I think it'd be really helpful for my readers to and site visitors to understand more of your background and also just be aware of the role you had in SIP and with the book that you did as well. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background and sort of how did you get to this point?
So yeah, Dan, I guess I've been working in communication and real-time communication pretty much my whole career. I spent many years in the Bell system, in the old telco world, working for Southwestern Bell, SBC, Bellcore, and the like. Um, that's also when I got involved in protocols and in signaling. I used to be an SS7 expert
Oh.
back in the day. Although thankfully I've forgotten all of it. I think by now. Um, but I worked in that for many years, and then as the internet came along, I was an early user of the internet. I remember using Mosaic, the first browser, and
Right.
thinking like, wow, this is going to change the world. I don't know how it's going to change the world, but this is going to change everything. And um, and then years later, when voice over IP came along, I was working for MCI, and I was working under Vint Cerf,
Oh.
who was one of the co-inventors of the internet. And um, and there was a big debate at the time between voice over IP, which doesn't have quality of service, therefore will never work, or voice over ATM, which is good telco circuit switched.
Right.
Uh, you know, we understand this, we can control it and make it work. And anyway, that was a fun debate. Um, and ultimately that led me to discover SIP, Session Initiation Protocol. I remember reading the MMusic SIP draft, I don't know, version 4 or something,
Hmm.
which I read this crazy draft by Henning and Jonathan and a few others, and I'm like, all right, these guys are crazy, but they're onto something, and I was like, this is
Right.
this is the new SS7. Um, voice over IP was out there, but it was all proprietary, and it was really limited, and it needed something to help everybody interconnect, to help everybody deploy faster, and to concentrate on the media quality rather than wasting a lot of time on signaling and all the setup and control, because ultimately users care about the quality of the media, whether it sounds good. And so I was lucky enough to get involved in the very early days of SIP, and I eventually got asked to be a co-author of the SIP spec. So RFC 3261 was
Okay.
was was my first RFC, which was quite an RFC to have.
What an eye opener for the IETF, right?
Yeah, it was a very, I mean, and in those days, it's like peak IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, the standards body that Dan and I have spent a lot of time at, and there were like over 1,000 people working group at the IETF, and that was like my first presentation. So that was pretty wild. And I ended up writing the first book on SIP that I published, and that was the first book that I ever published, and that was a really good experience, and has led me to publish more books. And of course, you and I collaborated on the first WebRTC book, which has been a great experience as well. Um, so yeah, so I've worked in communications. Recently, I've switched back to academia. I've been an
Mhm.
adjunct instructor for, gosh, like 17 years. So I've taught part time in the evenings and really
Right.
enjoyed it. And now I'm teaching full time at Rowan University in their electrical and computer engineering department, and really enjoying it. I'm actually teaching a communication systems class.
Ah.
Um, and so I'm actually going back to my original roots in communication, the thing before the internet, which was ham radio, which was how the world connected, how you just talk to random people all
Right.
over the world in real time. So I've been having fun getting back into that and showing my students, doing ham radio transmissions for them, and also bringing them up to speed on SDR, software defined radio, which is a
Oh,
whole thing that's really revolutionizing,
right.
radio communications these days.
Yeah, yeah, that's a hot topic itself. So that sounds like a lot of fun. So I know one of your projects you've been working on recently is something called SigSocket, and you've given a number of presentations on it, and you've talked about it several places. Um, but I'd love to hear about it, and really, I think the way I put it is that I'd love to know what was it that motivated you to do it? Um, People don't usually build things just because they're bored. I mean, sometimes they do, but usually there's a reason, right? And with signaling, this is, I'm going to let you talk more about it, but in just a moment. But, for WebRTC, where we didn't standardize signaling, it's kind of like, okay, another signaling approach. Why does the world need this? So tell us a little bit about SigSocket, and then maybe I'll get into, trying to
Sure.
understand why the heck we need this and you know, what does it do for the world?
Yeah, yeah. So as you and I, we've been doing WebRTC tutorials for years.
Right.
And one of the biggest questions we get is about a completely non-WebRTC topic, which is, of course, what is this signaling channel and how do I make it?
Right.
Right? We get that all the time.
Yeah.
And it's a little frustrating to we just spent an hour and a half or a day or 2 days talking about WebRTC, and then the questions we get hit with are all non-WebRTC questions.
It's right. What WebRTC
But
is not.
yeah,
Right.
but it's a really important piece. And
Right.
when you read the WebRTC specs, they talk about the signaling channel all over the place because you got to have it. You can't
Hmm.
do anything interesting without a signaling channel in WebRTC.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so you and I have been talking a lot. We always talk about signaling because we know it's a big question. And it's not only WebRTC needs signaling. If you're building a messaging app, if you want to build gaming that's got interaction, peer-to-peer interaction, then you also need some kind of signaling.
Right.
And people ask us, they said to us, what's something we can do? Is there a standard for this, right?
Hmm.
Because you and I are standards guys, we get that question. And we always mentioned SIP over WebSocket as something that's out there. And for
Right.
some people, that's a fit, right? If you have a SIP network, if you're a telco or a PDX company or whatever, then SIP over WebSocket just gateways into your existing infrastructure, and you're good. But for a lot of developers, especially web developers, gamers, messaging people, they don't have a signaling infrastructure. They don't know what SIP is. They don't
Mm.
want to have to learn something new in order to do that. And of course, for our demo code, for our
Right.
book, we just rolled our own signaling channel, right? We just did XHR, HTTP polling, and that works.
And this was one of
Um,
the promises of WebRTC too, right? Is that you can roll your own. You can do your own signaling. You don't have to
Definitely,
be stuck doing it exactly the way it's been done before.
definitely. No, nobody is prescribing how to do it. It's just certain pieces of information have to get between two browsers, and it's up to you how to do that. So it's kind of like freedom is good, but it can also be a problem if you're a developer because where do you start? What do you go with? Um, and so anyway, so we've spent a lot of time talking about signaling, and we get asked for recommendations. And frankly, I haven't seen a whole lot out there that really just solves the general problem for most people.
Hmm.
Um, and when I came across and when I got involved with SigSocket, it's like, yeah, this is the kind of thing that can be useful for people because it's just simple, and it's got security, and it offers one-to-one and one-to-many. It's open source. Um, because the other thing about signaling is that it's not just, it has client and server code in it, which is also something that trips people
Right.
up as well. Because they're like, okay, tell me the JavaScript I need to do signaling. And it's like, well, it's not that easy, I'm afraid, right? Because of NATs and firewalls, you got to have something running up in the cloud, right? You got to have this rendezvous server that your messages go through, right?
Right.
You can't open a WebSocket directly between two browser windows. It doesn't work. It won't work. So you have to go through a server that does a relay for you. So anyway, there's just all these complexities with signaling, and the thing I like about SigSocket is that it's just really simple. It's open source. People can try it and build on it and use it. Um, the other thing about it is that we're thinking about it as not it's not just about the code itself, but it's about the API. And we're hoping that
Uh-huh.
other people fork our code, other people do things with it, but maybe they keep the API the same, right? So that eventually we can have a somewhat standardized API that when people are looking at other people's WebRTC code or adapting or interacting, they'll look at it and be like,
Mm.
oh, I get what that is, right? That's the signaling channel. I know what this does, and just go from there
Right. So
rather than
everybody accesses the signaling channel the same way, regardless of how the signaling channel works,
yeah. I
essentially.
mean, I guess it's a bit of a dream, but who knows? It could happen.
Right. Okay. So, so you're using this. Is it intended to be for practical use, or is it more for learning purposes, do you think?
No, it's definitely intended for practical use. Um, and versions of this code are in production all around the world. So it's not like it's untried code that a
Hmm.
couple grad students threw together, and we'll find out soon whether it works.
Right.
Um, and also, we have adapted our demo application to use it. There's a version out there on the web that I should probably share the URL with, so that so folks can try it out if they've tried our demo.webrtcbook.com code before.
Okay.
Uh, there's a version of that basically swaps out the HTTP polling for SigSocket.
Okay. Right. And yes, definitely, right where you mentioned it in the transcript, we can put the link there. So good. So that's interesting. I, I can understand all the reasons that you gave for, signaling is hard, and people ask about it, and so this is one of the best ways to help them understand what they need to do. Um, and it sounds like you've spent some good effort on perhaps performance, if that's an appropriate phrase. I guess I should ask you about that. So, what has gone into performance or optimization, or what kinds of things were necessary? What did you do that sort of the average person who's trying to do this the first time might not think of, either in functionality or in performance?
Yeah, I don't know. Signaling. It's really about getting down to the bare minimums,
Hmm.
right? And getting rid of overhead, getting rid of excess things that you don't need. So I think one of the things we did with SigSocket is, what is the minimum that we need, right? And we decided on things
Okay.
like, one to one and one to many are needed, but you don't want to always do one to many, for example. And you
Mm-hmm.
you want to be able to address based on a user. You want to be able to address based on a session ID. So there's like a minimal amount of complexity that 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 developers will need. But on the other hand, we didn't add in a whole lot of other stuff. And I think when people look at, for example, SIP over WebSocket, and you look at the messages that get created, it's
Right.
like you got this big long string of things. It's like, okay, you ignore this, you ignore that. That's just nothing. That's just nothing. Nothing. Okay, this tiny little piece here. That's what you need.
Um,
And it's like, well, why send all the other stuff? Why are you bothering with
So,
this?
so that's actually a really good point. One of the pieces that has come up often, when I'm asked about this as well, about signaling, it really comes down to you can call it identity, you can call it, figuring out who the other person is, kind of thing. I mean, because the signaling piece is where that happens. By the time WebRTC itself starts, you already know who the other browser is, right? You've already made that determination. You've found the other browser essentially. Then the implementations of WebRTC then do all the ICE checking and all that kind of stuff that they need to for sort of an efficient path. But to even know who you're talking to in the first place, that all happens within your it's in the context of this signaling channel. It's some server out there. What did you find was that you really needed to put in order to enable that? I didn't prep you with this question. I'm just curious, and if you don't have an answer right
Yeah.
off the top of your
So
head,
so
that's
right
fine.
now, right now, identity in SigSocket is basically passed through.
Hmm.
We do authentication of the SigSocket server using TLS certs from Let's Encrypt using the cert bot there. So your signaling is so you're authenticated to your signaling server, and you'll get an error if you connect to the wrong one or anything like that. Um, but the actual identity itself is basically pass through. So you can pass through any type of crypto that you might be doing,
Mm.
or any type of authentication. It will also fully support the identity provider identity mechanisms that are in the WebRTC spec right now, and will
Okay.
one day get deployed, hopefully.
Right.
Uh, those will just seamlessly drop in as well. Um, it is an open question. Some signaling protocols have identity built into them, and
Right.
we haven't done that so far. If people really want that, that is something that could be added. But I think for now, having it be basically pass through is providing the best for developers right now.
Right. So it doesn't prevent someone adding their own identity and registration and whatever mechanisms.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Good. So I'm in this process of doing this. How well do you think you've done? So looking at what you have now, you think about what you were setting out to do. How did that go? How did it turn out? Do you think that this meets the needs that you were seeing for people in understanding and building signaling channels?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited with what we have out there now. But I also think it's just a start, and hopefully we're going to build a community around it. We're going to improve it. We're going to take it in directions that myself and others hadn't thought of.
Mm-hmm.
We really do want input from developers, what they need, what they like, what's out there, and the problems that you and I have found aren't necessarily problems that other people might have different problems that they're struggling with relating to signaling.
Right.
So it'd be great to learn what those are and to keep developing the project that way. So I think it's a great start, but I think it needs to keep growing. And if it's going to be useful to the community, I think it will get better.
So, and anyone can contribute, right? I mean, what do they need to do if they want to
Yeah,
contribute?
we're on GitHub, and so feel free to follow it and fork it and suggest changes and the like, and we're definitely looking for contributors as well.
Okay. Yeah, I had planned to ask that at the end, but it just seems sort of obvious to ask that now. I'm curious, in this process. So let's say somebody wanted to try to do their own. Let's say they were going to start from scratch. Actually, forget that. Just on this, I'll get back to that later. But on this itself, um, was there anything that was like trickier than you expected? You thought it was going to be simpler, and you ran into some real surprises. Maybe something that didn't go as well as you expected.
Yeah, not too much. I mean, I think there are timing issues with signaling that
Oh.
can get complex,
Hmm.
and I think we solved a few of those that came up. I mean, specifications like SIP are pretty long, and they have a lot of corner cases in them. Uh, Something like SigSocket is certainly a lot simpler, but there were still a few things that we had to fix in order to get them working right.
Hmm. Was there anything that actually was easier than you expected?
Um, I don't know. I mean, uh, I hadn't done a whole lot with GitHub in the past, so
Oh,
so I found it was pretty. I don't know. It wasn't too bad an experience working with it.
all right. So that's not so much about SigSocket itself. That's just that's your development environment was easier. Okay. All right. Yeah, I was just curious. You mentioned NAT traversal, which is interesting because that's a piece that is uh, built into WebRTC for the peer-to-peer connection pieces. For the media and for the data channel. but there's nothing provided for signaling. Was there something special that you had to do in order to deal with a NATS? I mean, this is not peer-to-peer. It's not client to client. It is client to server, which is sort of the typical web model. But I'm just curious if you had to do anything special there.
Yeah, not really. Right now the underlying transport of SigSocket is WebSockets,
Mhm.
and mostly those go through nets and firewalls. Okay, occasionally there are issues, and in the future we may add additional transports, keeping the API the same and just putting in a
Sure.
different transport, which could those could potentially have net and firewall issues in the future. But right now with WebSocket haven't really had any problems.
Hmm.
Of course, you do need you need to have a server. It's got to have a public IP address, and it's got to have a host name so you can get a TLS cert for. So those are all things that you need in order to make it work. That are kind of extra steps.
That's a great point that actually you're going to need that for any signaling approach, essentially. There's
Yep.
got to be a way to reach that server. Um, I'm wondering, are there any other things that you learned in this process that might be helpful? If someone decides they want to just try writing their own from scratch, because you and I know, right, that people will often say, I don't want to use that thing, I don't, that somebody else built. I'm just going to go ahead and build my own. So if someone were going to do that, is there something that you learned from doing this process that you would have as advice for them? Like, be sure to watch out for this, that you might not have thought of.
Not really. I mean, it's certainly quite possible to write your own signaling if you want to dedicate the time and effort to do it, and you can justify it. Not spending your time on the media and the things that users will see. Spending
Right.
your development hours on the plumbing that that no one cares about or sees. Then go for it. It's not really hard, but it just seems to me that developers are excited about the media, right, and about the
Uh,
presentation and about the application, and that's really where they should be spending their time and their creative energy in it.
right. So basically, this is an attempt to answer that question about signaling that you mentioned at the beginning that everyone asks, so they can quit talking about signaling and get on with what they really care about.
Yep.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious. Obviously, it's not done. Okay. Um, is there anything in particular, you don't know what you don't know, and that's why you're offering it up for anybody to be able to contribute to it. But is there anything aside from what you've already told me that is kind of in your head for that really should be in there? It's like a piece that you said, well, I don't know that we need to do this right now, but someone should do this later. Do you have anything that is sort of obvious to you that could need addressing?
um I don't know. I think right now it's SigSocket is very much bare bones, right? It's a JavaScript client library. It's a Python server library. There's plenty more things we can do to make it more interesting, like maybe a C library for app developers. On the server side,
Mm,
maybe a Docker image could be useful for people.
okay.
Um, Maybe having like automated integration with the Let's Encrypt certbot, for example.
Okay.
Uh, to add the cron job to automatically renew and things like that. I think those are some potentially interesting enhancements that could be done,
So
and
that's
also
mainly
like
integration and deployment. That's not so much core functionality, but more how you use it,
right,
right?
and long term, I think possibly other transports could be interesting
Right.
as well. I'm not sure what those transports are. I think WebSocket works pretty well and it's pretty well understood. But there could be cases out there where something better is needed.
Right. Even like HTTP 2, where you just kind of, that kind of functionality is built in, even. Um,
Yeah. I mean, there could potentially be some integration with that. Although HTTP 2 doesn't actually provide WebSocket functionality, which is kind of interesting. So I
hmm.
mean, you can build bidirectional communication only using HTTP 2, but frankly, it's a little bit awkward.
Uh,
But who knows? We may still do that as an underlying transport if there's a good reason for it.
okay. Okay. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about this, or anything else exciting that you're working on?
Uh, Not really. It'd just be great for the developers to give us feedback on SigSocket. You know, tell us what they think, what it needs, and that way we can make it better. And and you know, maybe in the future, if we do a good job, you know, we when we give our WebRTC tutorials, we won't get all those questions asked about signaling because it'll be like, oh, we got signaling. Don't worry about that.
Right.
Let's talk about those transceivers. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, what a nasty topic. All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, and
No, my
I
pleasure.
appreciate your time, and have fun.
All right, thanks, Dan. Hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yes. All right. Bye bye.